I'm DBJ, and welcome to Monster Monday. I am your self appointed third pillarist, and today we're going to talk the undead, or rather, let's rethink the undead, or even reskin them, repurpose them, rename them, reuse them. All right, so why this particular issue? I don't know. I guess I was flipping through books or had this idea about when we think of like the zombie apocalypse, when we think of the undead, whether they're cursed or they are there's a chemical leak or a disease that turns people into zombies, the first thing we think of, even with fantasy gaming and sci-fi gaming, we think of human beings. But what about in your world if elves or dwarves, gnomes, drow, tiefling, dragonborn became some other type of undead? Now, of course, you can always just say, well, I have stats for zombies and skeletons, and whether it's a dwarven zombie or a dragonborn zombie, it's just the regular zombie statistics. I just call them elven or dwarven or gnomish zombies. But we can get a little more creative if we want to. Sure, it might be a little bit more bookkeeping, but what if gnomes became and elves and halflings became a different form of undead? So let's reserve humans for zombies, and when they start to deteriorate, they become skeletons. Maybe all your elves become banshees, or maybe all of your Goliaths and half-orcs become, I don't know, some other kind of undead, whether they're vampires or um, any of the massive number of undead creatures that for some reason I didn't bother making a list of. Sorry about that, guys. But you understand. Um, you can also uh, go further than just using the undead stat block, the undead moniker. But what if your races became something that in their culture and in their society is an undead creature? Now, normally we think of the undead as being like the restless undead. They died, they did not have the proper death rites, they rise again to wreak havoc. Well, what if, for example, your dwarves became earth elemental creatures, right? They became, without the proper death rites, instead of passing into dust, they actually become earth elementals, and they began walking around and wreaking havoc until um, their version of clerics, maybe the elementalists are their clerics and have to cast them aside. Or you can become gnomes, and when they die, they become aberrant creatures, um, owlbears, chimera, griffins, hippogriffs, or any other combination. Maybe they come wolf spiders or snake gorillas or scorpion bats or something like that, right? Um, or not just elemental creatures, but what if tinker gnomes become golems, clockwork golems, that maybe when a gnome starts to age, they become like a arcano-punk type creature, where instead of them having shriveled skin and bone, and they become older, they start getting like gears and mechanical bits and pieces until they eventually do not move any longer. And if they're not given the proper death rites, they will awaken again and wreak havoc as a god. Also, what happens when your humanoid races die in your world? Does a dragonborn, when it dies, does it just die and become a creature, or does it take on the form of a snake, or do they are they engulfed in their own breath weapon when they are truly dead 3 days later? Or um, how about your tieflings? Does an evil in fire incinerate their bodies and pull them down to hell, or something like that? When they die, do they become a demon or a devil or some other um, cursed creature like a death hound or a hellhound, or maybe even the nightmare, the horse. There's just all kinds of options. Now, what you can do is you can just reskin the kind of undead. So, for example, if half orcs and orcs die in your world, and the half orcs are not given the proper death rights, they become monstrous ogres. You could just layer over top of them, oh, yeah, they're also undead, and they are affected by all of the pros and cons of being undead, including if someone is a life cleric or something like that. Or you could just claim that they are the equivalent of undead in their world, but they are not affected by the undead. They literally die and then come back as an ogre, and they are treated every bit as an ogre or some other being that you choose to decide. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring up the idea of alternate undead and how you would use them in your world. And also, here's another thing. We normally think of in medieval gaming that a curse or a necromancer brings people back from the dead. And in science fiction gaming, we normally think of accidents, chemicals, nanotech, some kind of virus brings them back as the undead. But we can mix the two and swap the two. So imagine in a Dungeons and Dragons style world that there's a subterranean underdark gas, and people exposed to that gas turns them into undead. Or it could be like The Walking Dead, where everyone is infected and everyone knows it. And when they come back from the dead, when they are killed, they come back from the dead automatically. I played in a game where there was the cursed desert, and anyone killed or who dies on that world, in that location, that locale, rises again as the undead, and they become these shambling shells of themselves, trying to perform the acts that they did before they died. So some may have been scrambling for water, and so they just travel with themselves and their families, and they scramble upon the earth. Also, what about undead monsters? Um, Dogs and cats and beasts that die that come back as the undead. Of course, we got the Draco Lich and the cults that bring them back. But what if there's a frond, a pollen, a poisonous plant that, when eaten, will kill the offending animal and bring it back as an undead beast? We also have undead masters, right? You've got yourself the lich, you've got yourself vampires, and we can always mix them as well. The eternal lich is craving power to live forever, but there are many others. What if there's a way for warriors in your world who desire the gift of eternal life so much they are willing to sell their souls to live forever, and then they become vampires in your world? For going back to science fiction, what if there's a kind of curse if you pass through a particular nebula, if the passengers are not in cryo sleep, if there's radiation that bleeds off of a world? It could be Jupiter, it could be Alpha Centauri, and any ships that pass through without the proper radiation protection become inundated by this thing. Or could be a virus. What if it's a basilisk virus, such as an eclipse phase, where you watch a computer program and that computer program reshapes your brain waves, turning you into an undead monstrous creature? So anyway, I thought I'd just bring something up. It's really food for thought, not really giving you answers, but more like, why don't we rethink the undead and make them unique to your world? Again, they could be elementals, they could be aberrants, they could all turn to spirits. Maybe when your humanoid races die, they don't just become desiccated bodies. Maybe they turn to glass or stone or dust or an unmoving golem, any of those things. So anyway, I'm DBJ, your self-appointed third pillarist. I'm a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. You can find me online. Just type in Dave Brian Jackson or Cinematic Environs, which is my baby, over at Critical Hit Publishing at DriveThruRPG. All the links will be below. Thank you for your attention, and keep an eye out for the Creators Conclave. It's a new video series I'll be doing with other broadcasters who may not have the attention. I want to bring up Darius Jonah. I just did a creators conclave with Darius Jonah, and you will find the link below. I have added the slightly over 2-hour panel I did with this gentleman about the hashtag My 30-Day World Challenge. You'll find all that below, and you can find that video with my in my playlist for the Writers Room, and many more after that. So anyway, thank you very much. Those are little updates. Thought I'd do a little short video short for me.